People don't really understand it until you actually see it coming at you in a wall of flame.
The noise is deafening, the stench worse, but locals are powerless to get rid of them unless they break the law.
It's a town under siege, overrun by bats that outnumber the population by hundreds of thousands. Every inch of every branch is covered with them. Mayor Raymond J.O. says they've now reached biblical plague proportions.
This week, a huge swarm of locusts has already affected a number of the countries in the Middle East, including surrounding Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Yemen, Oman, Ethiopia, Somalia, as well as Kuwait. Experts explained the outbreak was caused by an atmospheric depression and has been helped by high wind speeds across the region. In Saudi Arabia, they have so far hit crops in regions along the country's southwest coast. In Bahrain, video shows the insects landing on car windscreens as a large column flies overhead. It comes after a much larger swarm thought to number 360 billion decimated food supplies across Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya. The insects have also damaged crops in Djibouti, Eritrea, South Sudan, Uganda, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. The United Nations has warned of a humanitarian crisis. Countries have deployed planes to spread pesticides on the swarms, and Uganda has even called in its army.
But it was this moment, 2:46 in the afternoon, when Japan's nightmare began. The ground began to shake. 32 million people here in Tokyo braced themselves for the worst. The 8.9 magnitude tremor violently jolted the country. It was 1,000 times stronger than the earthquake that struck Haiti. Large chunks of buildings fell to the streets as people rushed for cover. The communication infrastructure so stressed, the occasional phone call or Skype interview is the only way to get eyewitness accounts. The Japanese TV station's NHK offices across the country shook.
I couldn't keep standing. So we instantly knew that it's going to be super huge, and many of my colleagues went onto the table to protect themselves.
In all corners of the country, everyday life upended. This government ministry meeting interrupted. These school children forced to run for their lives, and airport workers covered their heads with security bins as the earthquake brought down a huge chunk of ceiling. Pillars toppled at a Buddhist temple. Fires burned across the northern part of the country as gas lines ruptured, and this oil refinery was engulfed in massive flames.
People started running out of nearby buildings, and when you looked up, you could see that the skyscrapers nearby were swaying like trees in the wind. It was by far the most violent and terrifying earthquake I have ever been in.
These trains wobbled on their tracks as the earth moved below. Highways buckled, roadways split in half. The aftershocks, dozens of them, went on for hours. Meanwhile, on the coast, tsunami alarms blasted to the devastation yet to come. The 36-foot waves were relentless, mercilessly consuming everything in their path, pulling this house right off its foundation. And watch as it destroys an entire village while still burning fires ride the waves. You get a chilling sense of the enormity of it all, seeing this man on the back of his truck, watching helplessly as the destruction swirls around him.
You're seeing live footage of a tsunami engulfing the port area of Kamai City in Iwate Prefecture. This is what's happening right as we speak.
Hundreds of cars were swept along the current, boats tossed like bathtub toys. Devastated by the tsunami was the port city of Sendai, the closest city to the epicenter. Floodwaters consumed the city's airport. And with runways underwater, people sought refuge on the roof of the terminal. The quake triggered a state of emergency at two of the country's nuclear reactors. With their cooling systems crashed, a China syndrome meltdown and radiation leaks are feared. Thousands within a 6-mile radius were evacuated and cooling agents were rushed in, part of a desperate effort to avoid the worst.
And last night, there was a headline, Mondo.
Yes, sir.
About a Chinese man in the United States, and he was doing an interview.
Yes, absolutely. This is the billionaire whistleblower is what they're calling him. He was having an interview with the former White House chief strategist, Steve Bannon. And the information that this whistleblower brought to the table shocked probably every media outlet right now, is going viral. The information, he said this, he believes, I quote, 1.5 million people are confirmed with the coronavirus in China. But this is the shocking part. He believes over 50,000 bodies are being cremated right now, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is unheard of. Usually a crematory is run, for the whole week, maybe 4 or 5 hours a week. Well, this one right now in Wuhan is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And he's saying this: China, the media, the people are not telling us the truth of the real numbers of what he predicts and he believes of the people that are dying, not the people that are being quarantined. The deaths that were not being reported, he believes is probably in the millions already. We're not being told.
Just last night to this morning, there are 15,000 new infection cases as well as 250 new deaths that have already taken place within 24 hours.
And now, here's what they're saying. If they don't get a hold of it soon, 60% of the world will come down with this disease. Is that right?
Absolutely. According to Dr. Gabriel told The Guardian, it says this, and I quote, the coronavirus rate of infection suggests that 60% of the global population could get the virus if it is not brought under control.
The stories are unbelievable.
Trump hosted the country's top military commanders and their partners last night at the White House for dinner. The gathering came amid concerns about tensions with North Korea and the Iran nuclear deal. During a photo op in the White House dining room, President Trump made this puzzling comment.
You guys know what this represents? Well, maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
And now the president was asked again what he meant by calm before the storm, and he responded, "You'll find out." The White House has not clarified the comments further. Mr. Trump faces an October 15th deadline on the Iran nuclear deal. He is expected to refuse to certify that Iran is in compliance. CBS News White House and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan joins us now. She's at the White House. I share the question that was raised in that room, Margaret. What storm is the president referring to?
The White House is refusing to clarify what the president meant, and if you play out that full tape, you had reporters repeatedly say to the president, "Sir, what storm? Which storm? Are you talking about Iran? Are you talking about ISIS? What are you referring to?" It's a very unusual statement, and it's one that raises a lot of concern, not necessarily the people in that room, but here in Washington and around the world. It's not something that an American president does typically to sort of tease the idea of an impending crisis.
Shalom and welcome folks to the program Secret Identities. I'm your host, Chazawan Ahwar, and we'll be speaking at length. This is a radio presentation, a radio program where we will be speaking at length about the events and the happenings that we are seeing day to day, and currently things that are going to be happening very soon, and the biblical and prophetic connotations that are linked to these events. As people may think, the things that we are seeing and that are happening in our environment and our lives, we may think that is just coincidental, but we need to recognize that all of these things are biblical and prophetic. And this radio program is going to bring a little bit of insight as to these events and the biblical and prophetic connotations that align themselves to the current events of the day in news, wars and rumors of wars, and these kinds of topics. The conversation will also be discussing the hidden identities, the secret identities of the biblical people and the current generation, because of course we are of the belief that everyone has expired, everyone has been eradicated and extinct. We're not aware that the 18 nations that are existing in the Bible are on the earth today. They are here in existence. I decided to start this program due to the fact that I recognize that people are not aware that the Israelites, the chosen people, are still in existence. They are still in existence today. And these people are the Negroes, the Hispanics, and the indigenous peoples. Alright, now again we fail to realize that Negro, for instance, Negro and African, that's two totally different races of people, or nations of people I should say. Africans are Hamites, Negroes are Shemites. We are not the same. In addition to that, the progenitors of the Israelite race were Negroes, were black people. We need to also understand something. The tribes of Israel, 12 tribes of Israel, were separated into two, right? The northern kingdom were the peoples that inhabited the western hemisphere. That's the lost 10 tribes that you keep hearing about all over the place, and we're not too sure what's going on. People, oh, they're extinct, they died and whatever. That's the 10 tribes. The southern kingdom were the tribes that remained in Africa, particularly Benjamin, Levi, and Judah. Through the intermingling of the Israelite tribes and the other biblical tribes, we would have emerged with different types of Israelites. That's one of the reasons why you would have seen or heard Christopher Columbus making mention of the Indians, and that's what he called them, Indians. Indian means savage. These people aren't savage, but they call us that. Okay? And we are not aware of this. They all spoke Hebrew. Have you all ever heard of the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, the Olmecs, the Arawaks, the Caribs? We are all descendants of this slave trade, and the reverse slave trade as well, because we never hear about this reverse slave trade, where the Europeans came across to the Western Hemisphere under decree, the Dum Diversus. Look it up yourself. A 3-part decree. 1452, the Pope Nicholas V of Portugal, he wrote a decree and he issued it to all the European nations, subjecting everybody that they locate in the Western lands to something called perpetual servitude. In 1492, Christopher Columbus was assigned the task to come across to the New World. These people came across here because we were not listening to the Father. We were doing all sorts of things. We were sacrificing our children. All these pyramids. We came across here and we started to build them ourselves. Things we would have seen. These people sacrificing people on top of the pyramids, and the blood is running down the steps. That is what we used to do. We are not supposed to be doing those things. In all these other countries, we were enslaved in all these other countries. These were the things that we were subjected to, and we were taught. Even when these Europeans came across here, even when they enslaved our peoples, and we had to run to Egypt and run out of Egypt into the west coast of Africa and elsewhere called Negroland. The west coast of Africa was also called Negroland. We were in the people's countries. We were indoctrinated into their laws, their nasty commandments, their nasty things. We were indoctrinated into these things. And we're not recognizing that what we are involved in right now, this white Jesus philosophy, is their doctrine. When we were colonized by all these Europeans, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the English, all these other countries, they brought across their way of life here. If they're in control, we have to go with what they teach. We have to go with their laws, their statutes, their commandments, their traditions, everything that they're doing, we have to go with. If we're enslaved, we can't continue to run our lives the way we're accustomed running it. And the things that they were engaged in their own countries, they brought it right across here. Thanksgiving, for instance. That was the thanks that they were giving to their white Jesus when they massacred, I should say, all the indigenous peoples. And the turkey is a representation of the body of these Indians. The entrails of these indigenous peoples were represented by the cranberry and the other stuffings inside of the turkey. That is what Thanksgiving is about. We don't even recognize that's what it is. We just do what they do. The birthdays. Birthdays is a representation of self-worship. We're not recognizing this. We're not recognizing this at all. In the European countries, the law at that time was to worship the king on his birthday. He is Lord, he is God to these people. And if you don't worship the king's birthday, you will be killed. That spread throughout the entire, especially the British Empire. The British colonized 1/4 of the world. There's a saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. And all these doctrines and these things they would teach us, all these Baptist and Roman Catholic. Are we Roman Catholic? Are we Roman? No. But we're walking about the place. Oh, I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm a Christian. I'm a Pentecost. Protestant religions were the religions that protested against the Roman Catholic faith. And all these religions broke off. All these are called daughter religions. And these daughter religions are all going to return to the mother religion. We are not recognizing this. We are just zombified. Christmas, oh my goodness, I think that's the worst holiday ever. And again, we were all indoctrinated into it. I must admit, birthdays never interest me. All my friends will come and say, oh, it's the birthday, it's the birthday. Oh, today's my birthday, tomorrow's my birthday, next week is my birthday. They're not recognizing it's self-worship. And the only being we're supposed to worship is the Most High, Yahweh. We are not supposed to be worshipping ourselves. We are not supposed to be worshipping what we have done. If we have done something and it's very good and people appreciate what we do, we are supposed to thank the Father for blessing us with the propensity to do these duties. We are not supposed to be worshipping ourselves. We realize there's a disease ravaging the earth right now. Coronavirus, COVID-19. And it originated in China. Or so the claim goes, it originated in China. We need to also recognize that the Bible speaks about this. The entirety of Jeremiah 48 speaks about this disease from verse 1 to 47. I shouldn't say the disease itself. The verse speaks about the decimation of the peoples. We may fail to realize that Moab in the Bible is China, because we fail to realize that all the biblical nations still exist. The biblical nations still exist. We're like, oh, they're extinct, going through all your documentation. And it will tell you that, oh, these nations don't exist anymore. They went into oblivion. They went extinct. They are right here. Deuteronomy 23 verse 3 to 4 even goes a step further. Now I'll tell you all something. There's two specific reasons for this scenario that is happening with China at this point in time. This COVID-19. Alright, now you must remember that the plagues of Egypt have returned. They all have returned to the lands. And the Father is doing his specific duties to decimate whomsoever he wants to decimate, whenever time he wants to decimate them. So we can't stop that. But there are two reasons. You see, the entire race of China, the entire race of Japan is Ammon, if we didn't know that. The entire race of these people, Thailand, Korea, all these people, they're incestuous. Remember, Lot had an incestuous relationship with his children, or I should say the other way. The daughters of Lot had an incestuous relationship with their dad. Which would mean the entirety of this race, this nation, is built on incest. Father doesn't like that at all, but he still allowed it to some extent. The biggest issue that he had was the enslavement of his chosen people out of Egypt during that Exodus, when we were supposed to be requiring assistance from these other nations. Moab, we were supposed to pass through that territory of Moab and Ammon, and they refused us. We were actually willing to purchase food and water and other necessities, other sustenance from them. We were willing to actually purchase it. But they had a confederate. They conspired against us. They confederate against us with the Assyrians, with the Hagarenes, with the other nations in that location of the Levant. And they all came together and they enslaved the entire nation of Israel, the southern kingdom of Israel that was leaving Egypt during the Exodus. So whomsoever got away, got away. Whomsoever were caught, were caught. Enslaved. That's the biggest issue the Father has with them. And that's why he's dealing with them like that. That's the reason why they will never return into the congregation of the Lord forever, not even to their 10th generation. To continue hearing more about the topic, join us in our next episode. Thank you so much for participating, and tune in again next time for another episode of Secret Identities. Shalom Yasharallah.